Jesus was continually under attack, especially from the established, powerful religious leaders who had become comfortable and slovenly in the exercise of their responsibilities. It was like sticking a knife in the back of these leaders, for this man sent from God, Jesus, to go continually associating with the outcast, the slum, the scum. And naturally the religious leaders would react, why doesn't he come here among the religious ones? Why doesn't he come here among us where he belongs? And why doesn't he accept things as they are? Things as we have worked so hard to establish them. Well, as Jesus was criticized for his actions, he very often would use parables as his defense in situations of conflict with these religious leaders. The parables would serve to make a point in a very dramatic and cutting way, to make a point in such a way that there really was no defense that could be made in return. And as we have said before, the parables really leave no room for someone to stand off to the side and enjoy what is going on. He's really getting them now. But rather the parables seem often to be a double-edged sword. And it leaves no place for someone to stand comfortably, simply enjoying what is going on, but rather the parable cuts each person to the quick in the way in which he needs to be cut to challenge the position that he now occupies. This morning, let's treat this parable of the great feast as if it were a jewel which we will hold up and slowly turn around, examining it yet from the various sides to see its various facets, to see the various ways in which it sends forth an impulse to challenge, to prod men in the different stances which men may stand around and occupy. The different stances from which a person being challenged could respond none other than he wouldn't dare. And yet the message which we get from the parable, he does dare. He does dare prod each person out of the comfortable nick which he has carved out for himself. This parable centers around the invitation which was given to a group of persons to come to a banquet, an invitation which was refused. Now, if the invitation were to come and help chop a winter's supply of firewood, or to come help put in a new lawn, the situation would be much different. The refusal would be an indication of unwillingness to have such demands, such hard requirements placed upon me. But when an invitation to a banquet, an invitation to come and enjoy something is refused, the implications of the refusal are much different. And the refusal carries with it a deep, cutting hurt. For essentially, you are saying to the person, no thank you, I would much rather have my own party. There is no more effective way to cut down the social climber than for the right people to refuse his invitation. The story is told of the boy for whom a group of his friends had planned a surprise birthday party. And his mother, the boy's mother, had agreed to see that the boy was at home on this certain day at this certain time. And so when his friends arrived to give the party for him, he was out playing, and his mother called him out the back door, but he didn't answer. He didn't show up. She called and still no response. And long after the party was over, the boy finally showed up, greatly disappointed that he had gone and hid when his mother had called, thinking that she had a job for him to do. No doubt there are always some who, receiving an invitation, immediately react that something is being asked of them. The person who is unable to ever feel that someone simply wants to give them something. Someone simply is concerned that they receive. The person who is always suspicious of any invitation. But in addition to this person, there also is the person who had just as soon go and have his own party, just as soon have his own banquet, and simply does not want to receive anything from anyone. Well, it seems that Jesus in the opening sentences of this parable is reminding us that at the heart of Christianity is a gift and an invitation to us to accept this gift. The heart of Christianity, the beginning point, and the beginning point of Christianity is not someone coming and making great demands upon us, but rather someone coming, inviting us to a banquet, someone coming and out of grace and mercy wanting to present to us something of great value. And yet how often the gift is refused because any approach is suspect, but also probably more often refused because, no thank you, I had just as soon do it myself. No thank you, I just as soon be religious on my own. You see, I can live a good, moral, upright life without having to take this handout from you. And then as we turn this jewel slightly, we begin to see another facet of it. We begin to see that the invitation is refused not out of spite nor out of rebellion, but simply because those invited do have very noble and admirable things to do. One person has just bought a field and needs to go out and look at it. Another has just bought 5 yoke of oxen and needs to examine them. Another has just married, feels that he should not leave the new bride. You see, not the tremendously evil things that would put a person in rebellion, but rather important things which seem just more deserving right at this moment. If I am to do what I should do, then I will go and take care of these matters. Bishop Palmer has a very picturesque way of putting this situation when he speaks of the sheep who, rather than intentionally wandering off from the shepherd and from the fold, instead nibble their way lost, eating one clump of grass and then seeing another one right ahead of them, going to it, and another clump going to it, and then eventually raising their heads up and realizing that they, having not intentionally wandered off, yet are completely lost from the fold. You see, even from the beginning of time, man has not become lost because of open, intentional rebellion. Adam and Eve did not consciously defy God by eating the apple, as we have this story in the Genesis accounts. But rather they ate the apple, according to Genesis, because it was a delight to the eye and something to be desired. They felt that this was the thing to do. This is what they should do. The apple was there. It would only be right that they ate it. Well, you know all the typical and noble, admirable excuses which people give today. You know them as well as I do. They admit the importance of the church and of religion, and yet they also feel that the family is important. Time spent with the family takes precedent over the time which they otherwise would spend in religious activities. The family is important. And by putting the family above Christianity, above the church, the person certainly is not in rebellion. And then the person who feels that they want to wait until the husband or the wife will go along with them, they feel that keeping this relationship intact is more important than driving a wedge between it. Certainly. Admirable. Noble. The person who feels that he is a good person, he follows the 10 Commandments, he follows the golden rule, what more is needed? He feels that the church and deeper Christianity really could not offer too much more. Again, the person not in rebellion, attempting to live a good life. And then the person extremely busy with his work. He's at it 7 days a week. He's an industrious person. Someday the work will slack off, and then I'll be able to do some of these other things. Again, we admire this person. We admire him. Certainly he's not a slovenly, lazy person. It seems that the excuses which we find today, the things which stand between the person and the invitation given to come to the banquet, are pretty much the same today as they were in Jesus' day. And now I most humbly suggest what seems to be the inescapable sharp barb of this parable. I most humbly suggest that the central message of this parable is that others are invited to the banquet. These good, upright, noble persons are forgotten. The chance goes by, and others are brought in to take their place at the table. And the cry from those persons in Jesus' day certainly must be the same cry sent up by persons today. He wouldn't dare. He wouldn't dare. Then I would be quick to suggest that maybe he really isn't the one who has done it. That maybe we ourselves really do nibble ourselves lost. Maybe we do keep at this business of simply eating the clump of grass right immediately ahead of us so long that we completely lose sight and even lose knowledge of the luscious green field which could be ours for pasturing. Maybe we actually reach the point where this straggly, dried up clump of grass immediately in front of us, to our knowledge, becomes the best grass, the best grazing available in the whole wide world. The story is told of the little old lady who very unwisely spent what little money she occasionally got. She would spend it in other ways than in paying her bills, and occasionally the water would be shut off, or the gas turned off, or the telephone disconnected until she paid. And as the story goes, there was one particularly cold spell one winter, and the little old lady turned on a faucet one morning with no results. She telephoned the water company and asked, "Tell me, am I froze up or am I turned off?" You see, whichever it is, the result is still all the same. The water just is not there. And the fact is inescapable that we are the ones ourselves who are responsible for the dryness, for the shriveling dryness, the shriveling drought. And so as we turn the jewel a little more, another facet becomes clearly visible now. And in spite of our outraged cry, "He wouldn't dare," we begin to clearly see that it can happen. We begin to clearly see that we are dispensable. And in response to our cry, "He wouldn't dare," we hear reflected back to us, "Yes, he would." Attached to the amplifier used for this public address system, which we now have, were notes which repeatedly said to the person who would be working with the amplifier installing it, notes saying, "Assume nothing. Before doing anything, read instructions thoroughly. Assume nothing." Now this was a rather startling message for me to find on this piece of equipment. Certainly for myself, it would be foolish for me to assume anything when it would come to working with electronics, but the message was not for the ordinary layman such as myself, but the message was for the electronics technician, the expert himself. Assume nothing. Well, this seems to be the message which Jesus is presenting to those religious experts in his day. Assume nothing. This parable which he tells here of the great feast comes right after he tells another parable, after he had noted the ease with which these religious experts came and always assumed that they were to have the places of honor. And he tells a parable in which he warns them never to come in to a feast and just plop down in the places of honor, lest they be instructed to get up and go to the lowest place, yielding their places to someone of whom essentially they would say, "He would not dare give that person the high place." And Jesus is essentially saying to them, in spite of your assumptions, he would dare. I have in my possession 4 maps which I often refer to. One of them is the city map of Walla Walla. And as I refer to this map, it's all Walla Walla. Another is a map of Washington State. And as I look at this map, very readily I can pick out Walla Walla. It's there in clear, bold letters. Another map is that of the United States, and it's fairly easy to pick out our town on that map. It's notated in very small letters, but it can be found. The other is a globe of the world. And I'll have to be frank and admit that on that, Walla Walla does not stick out. In fact, it takes a little time even to discern where it would be located if it were even noted on the globe. How important for us to see ourselves in perspective. How important for us to see ourselves in relation to all that is. How important for us not to blindly assume everything. How important for us to finally realize that the thing which makes a person great, the thing which gives to a person the place of honor, is not the qualifications which he is able to bring and present the foot of the Master, but rather his ability to accept the invitation, his ability to accept the gift, his ability to receive the grace, the mercy. For you see, the person who in the end is the religious person is not the person who is able to do all these good things, the person able to be religious on his own, but rather the person who is willing to live from the hand of God, the person who is willing to receive, the person who is willing to remain open to what his Father wants to give to him, and also open to what his Father wants him to do with his life and in his life. The person assuming nothing, who is willing to read the instructions. Well, what does it all add up to? The story is told of a boat many years ago of the Lee Line carrying a cargo of meat, leaving New Orleans for the city of Memphis. And on the trip, a boat of a rival company threatened to pass it. The captain of the Lee Line vessel felt that it would not be becoming to allow this boat, his boat, to be passed by that of a rival company, so he ordered full steam ahead. However, as this failed to be enough to stay ahead of his rival, he thought of the cargo that he was carrying, and he ordered some of the fat meat to be used to stoke his engines in the hope of increasing his power. And it worked so well that he resorted to that expedient again and again. And at last, with whistles blowing, and flags flying, he reached the city of Memphis far ahead of his rival. Well, that was well and good. But when the merchants came for their cargo, they found that it had all been burned up on the way. The race was won, but the cause was lost. How tragic for a man's attention to be so drawn by the new field, new yoke of oxen, the new life, that he loses sight of the thing of ultimate and eternal value in life. How tragic for him to always assume that he is doing the thing of highest value, only to find that in winning the race, he has lost the cause. How tragic to always assume he wouldn't dare, only to find out that he did. How tragic for a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul.